Committee will come to order. Since we're meeting virtually here today, you may not be able to tell that our digital dais is a little bit larger than usual. And that's because we're being joined by Congresspersons Radewagen, Sablan, Plaskett, Gonzalez Colon, and San Nicolas as we discuss hunger and food insecurity across the territories. I've often said that no community is immune from the hunger crisis. That's true for these regions as well, which face unique challenges and opportunities when it comes to dealing with the issue of hunger. That includes things like transportation, economic drivers, the importation of resources and food costs and storage. The COVID pandemic also touched these areas in unique ways, especially when it comes to the impacts on the tourism industry. The more than 4 million American citizens who call the territories home all too often find themselves marginalized in national discussions. So I want to do our part to change that because they deserve to have their voices heard. And I want to thank my colleagues for joining us here today. I'm looking forward to this discussion. My hope is that we'll discover some important priorities to include in our record that will inform an eventual White House Hunger Conference. And so before I introduce the witnesses here, let me again try to put all this in perspective. One of the things I have learned over many years here in Congress, as one who has tried to make ending hunger a priority, is that it's hard because the issue of hunger doesn't fall neatly under the jurisdiction of one committee. I mean, Agriculture Committee does SNAP, Education and Labor Committee does school feeding, the Armed Services Committee and Veterans Committee deal with hunger amongst active duty service members. The Ways and Means Committee has a role in this. The Appropriations Committee has a role in this. And as a result, we deal with little pieces of the puzzle, but we don't talk about it holistically. The same thing in the administration. Not one department, not one agency is responsible for ending this crisis. And so, the Rules Committee, which I chair, well, we don't really have jurisdictional limitations like other committees do. So we are using kind of our unique status to be kind of like almost a special select committee, if you will, to try to connect all the dots, to try to work with all the committees and try to look at this more holistically. Because no matter, in my district, when you talk about ending hunger, it's not just about a benefit, like a SNAP benefit or Meals on Wheels. It also includes housing. It includes a job that pays a livable wage. It includes a whole bunch of things. And I've been talking to the various heads of our various agencies and departments, asking them all to buy into this idea of a White House conference because they all have a role. I talked to Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, last week, and I asked her to get on board with this, and she kind of paused, and I said the reason why is because in my district where it gets cold, energy costs contribute to food insecurity. Not to mention the importance of the climate crisis that we need to deal with. I talked to Pete Buttigieg at transportation. Transportation has a role in this, getting people to and from places, refrigerated trucks or whatever. I mean, there's a role for transportation. And I go on and on and on in every agency and department. So that's the goal. So what this informal discussion that we are having here today will be part of the record that we will present to the Biden administration to deal with this issue for this White House conference that we hope will happen next year. And because I work with the distinguished representatives that are on this call here today, in my capacity as chairman of the Rules Committee, I know that it is important that when we talk about these issues, that the territories don't get left out. And so that is what this is all about here today. So let me go over some of let me just announce some of the witnesses that we have here, a little bio. John Fernandez is the superintendent for the Guam Department of Education. He has served in this role for 10 years and worked diligently during the COVID-19 pandemic, as he did before, to run the free reduced school lunch program and to make sure that kids have the resources they need to learn. The Honorable Kimberly Kazi Gomez is the Commissioner of the Department of Human Services in the Virgin Islands. She is a licensed certified social worker and brings over 30 years of volunteer and specialized professional expertise to the department. The Honorable Carmen Ana Gonzalez Magaz, am I saying that properly? Good, thank you. I'm from Massachusetts, so sometimes people think we speak funny. And is the Secretary of the Family Engagement Office at the Department of Education in Puerto Rico. Her work is aimed at strengthening communities by using the available resources, partnering with the third sector, and making sure students have the support systems they need to achieve academically. And Tom Tiputeb, am I saying that right? Is it Tebuteb? Who is the Secretary and Office in charge of the Empty Vessel Ministry Foundation. They have been active in assisting needy and impoverished families with clothing, education, supplies, and food donations. They have continued their work through natural disasters, and most recently through the COVID-19 pandemic. And but we're going to begin this discussion. I'm going to yield to Congresswoman Radewagen, because I know time differences and other issues have made it difficult to get a representative on the line right at this particular point. But we will yield to you first to begin the discussion, and then we'll go through the list, and then we will all engage in a discussion again with keeping in the back of our mind what we're trying to do is help lay out some ideas and solutions that we hope that the Biden administration will take up as part of developing an overall plan to end hunger in this country once and for all. So I yield to you, Ms. Radewagen.
Thank you, Chairman McGovern, and Talofa Lava, and Ranking Member Cole for hosting this roundtable to discuss food insecurity in the territories. Your efforts to combat hunger in our nation are appreciated, and I want to express my sincere gratitude for being included in this important discussion. I also want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your tremendous support last year to include an increase in disaster nutrition assistance for American Samoa. The value of your continued support of vulnerable communities like American Samoa cannot be understated. Thank you to all the local guests from each district. We all appreciate you working with the time zone difference, and thank you to the staff for coordinating all of this. I also want to thank Director Mwabai Fatasi of the American Samoa Department of Human and Social Services, who unfortunately could not join us today due to a scheduling conflict, but who has graciously agreed to submit a statement for the record. I'm sure a full picture of American Samoa will be included in documents submitted for the record, but in lieu of Director Suisala's verbal testimony, I'd like to briefly touch upon some of the issues faced by my home district, to which I'm sure my territorial colleagues might relate. The majority of American Samoa lives below the poverty line, as there's a clear connection between poverty and food insecurity.
This meeting is being recorded.
Our population is particularly sensitive to any changes in government food subsidies like food stamps. The standards by which the rest of the country measures the need for food stamps simply cannot encapsulate the needs of our territory. While our block grant program should offer some flexibility by separating us out from the federal SNAP benefits, the eligibility for food stamps doesn't always reflect the relative needs of our population. So I want to reiterate my thanks to Chairman McGovern for his support for increased SNAP coverage during the crisis last year. And I hope that Congress can continue to offer that support as needed post-pandemic. In addition to economic struggles, our remote location also has an impact on food security. We import almost all of our food, and any interruptions in the supply chain are a direct threat to our people's well-being. While import and quality regulations are important to keep our supply chains safe from foodborne illness and illegal activity, it sometimes is the case that bureaucratic action impedes the flow of goods, causing prices to rise. And as a result, the most unfortunate of us can go hungry. So our island has been struggling to secure the services of a dedicated USDA certified meat inspector for quite some time now. We've been relying on off-island inspection, which adds extra time to the process. It's prone to delays. The meat has to sit in a refrigerated container until a inspector comes down from the States to inspect it. Our local people have also expressed concerns about their ability to bring food from Western Samoa. And while the two Samoas are very close and have strong ties to each other, the fact that Western Samoa is an independent country means moving goods between islands is subject to import regulations, which add yet another layer or two of difficulty, even when locals are just trying to send food to their families. An otherwise close and convenient source of food is rendered too complicated to take advantage of. Regulations that don't take into account local circumstances not only affect imports, but also local food sources. For example, differing interpretations of procurement regulations have made it difficult for our local Department of Education to use local produce for our school lunch program. A workaround exists, but the resulting subcontracting structure means that local farmers are losing a cut of their profits to middlemen, which in turn disincentivizes them to participate. So neither the farmers nor the school children can fully benefit from such arrangements. So these are just a few highlights of complicated relationship between government policies and our ability to feed our families. But in addition to the standard regulatory concerns, there's another aspect of food security that I'd like to hear from our guests today. That is local culture. Our local Territorial Administration on Aging, or TAOA, provides a hot meals program for our elderly. However, our elders have often complained to me that they are dissatisfied with the program as the government standardized meals do not always align with the local palate. They would also prefer a system that allows them to share and eat food with their families. Eating together is a very important communal experience in our culture. And in fact, the program was initially designed to be a congregated meal service, but due to logistical issues and lack of transportation from remote villages, this doesn't always happen. So while the standardized meals technically meet all their basic nutritional needs, and the TAOA officials do their best to care for our elders, many of our elderly feel the resulting structure is an overly inflexible and impersonal experience, and they are unable or have even refused to engage with the program as a result. I want to turn it over to our guests to share any examples from their communities. What role does local culture play in addressing food security? Have there been any instances where government efforts to address the physical problem of hunger have come into conflict with the more humanitarian elements of helping our people?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now turn to Mr. Hernandez. I mean, Mr. Fernandez, I'm sorry.
Hafaday, good afternoon or good morning to you, Chairman McGovern, distinguished congressmen and congresswomen, especially, and we recognize Congressman Nicholas from Guam as well. Thank you for bringing me into this conversation, and also for our distinguished guests from the other territories. Good to be here today to address the panel and to talk about hunger and food insecurity in our region. I won't go over every single word of my testimony, but I will touch upon the highlights, and you will see that as the chairman mentioned, while hunger crosses across, several, many different areas of our community, the perspective I'm bringing today really has to do with my role and the role that the Department of Education, our school systems can play, and especially the role that we've seen the school systems play during this pandemic. So there are really four areas in which GDOE, the Guam Department of Education, has been involved in addressing hunger and food security issues on Guam, especially over the past 18 months. We're a school system of about 28,000 traditional public school students. We have a little under 2,000 charter school students and about 6,000 private school students here on Guam. And throughout the past couple of years, we've been very active in addressing this very issue as part of the community recovery and response to COVID-19. Prior to the pandemic, I think one of our areas of focus was really maximizing the participation of our children in the school meals program, the school breakfast and lunch program. And we were I would say very blessed to have worked hard to meet the requirements of the community eligibility provision, which was authorized by the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010. And we were very thankful for that support. In 2014-15 school year, we piloted half of our 41 schools under this program, which enables our children, essentially because of our poverty rates and because of our history in the free and reduced meals program, all of our kids at these schools are able to eat at no cost. So we piloted it back in 2014, and then in 2018 we were able to go for all and apply the program to all of our 41 schools. So prior to the pandemic, we were very aggressive in trying to address the issue of food security, of who ate, how many kids ate, how many were free and reduced, how to reduce the stigma, how to address the administrative paperwork, and so forth. And this program really has worked out for Guam, and it's one of the tools that we're using to just ensure that kids have enough to eat and have access, to food while they're at school. And we certainly hope that this program continues to be authorized and perhaps even expanded in terms of the cycle of reimbursement, as well as maybe the eligibility standards for other areas to participate. That was prior to the pandemic. And so we were able to increase participation in our meals program through the CEP, especially with older kids, because our older kids, you see the school meals participation go down, and less of them want to eat and want to be with their friends more, but we saw the numbers go up. That was prior to the pandemic. When we hit the pandemic, and this is our second area I wanted to talk about, we faced the immediate challenge of moving from feeding all kids at no cost to not having the ability to feed any kids at all, because on March 16th of 2020, that's when the pandemic came to our shores on Guam, and essentially the entire island was shut down on that day, including our schools and our other government agencies and so forth. So within a couple of days, and because food access is a critical priority for us, we were already working with our Western Region office at USDA to try to find the flexibility to be able to figure out how to push meals out into the community, because we had the meals, we just didn't have the students. We were very lucky to have good partners at the regional office who were it was within 48 hours were able to turn around approval under the seamless summer option to give us the flexibility to begin to immediately implement basically a drive-through, what we call grab-and-go meals distribution at our schools. And so for the rest of that school year, which was school year 19 to 20, we were pushing out daily hot meals at 12 school sites, at which all students who were eligible in our school system were able to go and collect their food. And this was a daily operation. A lot of manpower and planning and logistics had to go into it, but it was our way of continuing the flow of school meals into the community and allowing them to take the meals home and to consume them at home. And we had a lot of a lot of demand, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. We eventually modified that approach. We ended up for school year 2020 to 2021, switching from a daily hot meals to a once a week Friday distribution, where we were able to switch from hot meals to non-perishable food items. And we would then essentially pack five school meal breakfast and 5 school lunch meals in bags for our families and distribute them every Friday at all school sites. And we were able to do that through the entire school year. Actually, we only ended this program at the end of summer school on July 16th, because now we're going to be returning to regular operations for the coming school year. So between March 2020 to July 2021, we were able to distribute a total of over 7 million school meals into our community for kids and for families. The third area which became really critical during the pandemic was the TFAP program. So Guam Department of Education administers the TFAP program, the Emergency Food Assistance Program on Guam. And this is an ongoing program that we typically operate twice a week from a central warehouse on the island. So twice a week we open the warehouse and we receive the eligible household members will come by, line up, go through the process and take commodities home as we're able to distribute. When the pandemic hit last March, we shut that program down because of our fear of bringing people, congregating more than 50 people at a time at any location. So we actually shut it down for a couple of weeks. And then we reverted to just working directly with our nonprofit partners to push these commodities out to their clients. Also to our mayors, we have village mayors and our senior centers, just to support the clientele, the constituents, without having to distribute, from a warehouse. But due to the federal relief, the commodities that were coming our way were just voluminous, and we needed to find a way to resume operations. So we opened up in May, tried to go to a food to trunk. It's kind of like drive-through. You take the food and you put it in the trunk of the car. We tried to reopen that back at our warehouse in the central part of our island. And, we typically have traffic issues within maybe an eighth of a mile of that location. That first day, the traffic went in 3 different directions for 3 to 4 miles of cars lined up. That was a signal to us that this was going to be the start of a really critical situation in terms of food. So we began to shift our operations. We tried to find regional sites to go to in other parts of the island where there was more space. People were lining up in their cars at 2 a.m. to get in, to be ready for that line that opened up at 7 a.m. and so forth. We eventually were able to, in September of last year, devise a partnership with our village mayors. And now we do that on a rotating basis in every village, which has appeared to work. But we've pushed out 2 million units of commodities through the TFAP program from March to July of this year. And that's a continuing effort that will last as long as those commodities continue to flow in. Finally, the fourth area where we are working in this to assist our families. The pandemic EBT program, we are very appreciative of. We actually just got approval from USDA on our PEBT programs covering the time period of last August to May of this year, essentially last school year. Because of the setup of our program, the implementation of the CEP for all of our students, all 28,000 students in our school system are eligible for the PEBT program, which means that beginning in late August, when we distribute these cards to the families, each student will receive a benefit that amounts to around $1,200 to $1,300 in food assistance through this card that they'll be able to use for the coming year to go out and purchase food, for their families. So not only we're feeding them during the pandemic, but even as we go through this recovery period, they now have an additional $1,200 per child to be able to go out and assist with the food needs of the families as we try to get back on our feet. So again, those are the 4 areas which we believe were strengths and things we want to build on. There are other areas I identified in my testimony that we would love to see, continue or be improved upon, but essentially that's our story here at the Guam
Thank you.
Department of Education.
Well, thank you very much. I now want to turn to the Honorable Kimberly Kazi Gomez.
Hello there. How's everyone? Everybody looks so beautiful. So great to be here.
It's like Hollywood Squares.
I know. I don't know where to choose. Good afternoon, Chairman McGovern, House Rules Committee members, our representatives, and a special greeting to our very own U.S. Virgin Islands Representative Stacey Plaskett, my esteemed colleagues from the other islands and territories, the listening, and of course our viewing audiences. I'm Kimberly Kazi Gomez. I'm the Commissioner of the Virgin Islands Department of Human Services, and it's such a unique opportunity to appear and to talk about something that's really important to me, ensuring that everyone that can afford and have access to nutritious food in order for them to thrive each and every day. And most importantly, how collectively can we end hunger together? I've been in social work for about 30 years, and I've done it from the grassroots perspective all the way up to a policy level now as commissioner. And I know that in our times of crisis, especially the inequalities in access to federal benefits, employment and food, and all those other needs intensify and become more visible. Those living in poverty and facing vulnerability feel it the most, and their food insecurity increases. Low income, our debt, unemployment, disability, homelessness, our food prices increase, age, and all environment can all play a role. And I believe since the food insecurity is experienced differently across race and ethnicities as well, and during the COVID pandemic, it's only intensified this need. The goal, I feel, of ending hunger in America should be inclusive, and I'm so thrilled and encouraged that not only all of the territories, but the Virgin Islands is included and at the table, so to speak, about how our needs may be similar to other places in the world, but we're also emphasizing some of the challenges that we may experience differently than other places. We are unique, like others. We are separated. We have 4 islands and we're surrounded by water. And so in order for us to serve or get to another place or another island, we have to take an airplane or we have to take a boat. And we don't have the comfort in evacuating during times of a disaster like hurricanes or earthquakes. The other evening, I got a VI alert 5 times right in a row because we had 5 earthquake warnings back to back. And so where do we go? We're still in recovery. 2017 was rough. 2 Category 5s back to back within a matter of weeks for us. So our disaster recovery is long, and it's not a simple overnight fix of our infrastructure and our buildings of our homes. I like to say that we have a lot of blue roofs still, which means that people are not able to really afford to repair their homes, and so they have tarps still on them. So when you're flying in, you can still see a lot of blue roofs. In order to obtain sustainable food and commodities, everything has to be shipped or flown in daily or weekly or monthly. And so that could cause the nutrition, when it gets here, it's not always the freshest. The added cost of shipping is then added to the consumer. And if we didn't have our federal program support, like our child care subsidies, our Head Start program, our SNAP, or our Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or our Meals on Wheels, some people would be very hungry. Especially those that fall right in that little cusp of not being eligible for the federal programs. A little bit about human services. We're entrusted to serving our most vulnerable populations throughout the territory. Our ultimate goal is to assist our constituents from the littlest people to our oldest, and we really want them to be self-sufficient. We have 80+ programs and services, and nutrition is just one of them. The Virgin Islands population, we're about 104,000 people. And all of those numbers, I think this is what's really important for us to know, is our Medicaid program, which comes under Human Services. Currently, as of yesterday, we serve 33,561 members. That represents 31% of the population of the Virgin Islands. Our Head Start program, throughout the whole pandemic, we provided nutritious meals and snacks for our students. We increased our Meals on Wheels services to serve more seniors through the pandemic with pandemic funds. And what was interesting too, for the 2021, we had 26,776 individuals, or 39% of our Virgin Islands population, receive SNAP benefits. We were very blessed that we were able to complete 2 rounds of the Pandemic Electronic Benefits Transfer, or PEBT. We're in the middle of doing our 3rd round of benefits. We're hoping that summer will be a blessing for us as well. And what that includes is all of our public schools and the majority of our private schools offer that free and reduced lunch program. So getting those statistics. So it's about 17,000 students. And then this time, this 3rd round, we actually included our little people in childcare settings that were under the age of 6. So we expanded that from about 13,000, now it's about 17,000. I think the hunger crisis, we're very lucky and blessed in the Virgin Islands that if someone's hungry, we usually feed them. However, there's a lot of people that we see that are very alone, that don't have any family members to take care of them. And I think if food alone was the answer to our crisis, then we probably would have solved it by now. But I think there's a larger, bigger solution that has to be look at the food system from start to finish. And also the accessibility and who can afford food. I know that the second part of it is really complex, and it's really the root cause of generational poverty. And in order to break that cycle, we're going to have to really focus on how we can do that specifically. As a social worker for 30 years, I've seen generations go through our system and are still in our system. Virgin Islands government, like everyone else, it's a balancing act regarding our tourism, our fiscal resources and revenues, increasing during the COVID response. Just when we think we have it under control, our numbers go up a little bit. So we're trying really hard to protect the health and safety, and then also the wealth of the community. Vaccination is really important, but a lot of our population, a lot of my staff don't want to get vaccinated. I'm a proud mom of an active duty U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Antonio Gomez, and my daughter's in college, Gabriella, and combine that with the Virgin Islands Department of Human Services as my family. I'm so inspired by our community and our agency, who continue to do amazing work. Our nonprofits try to meet that gap as well, but they're only as good as the funding that they're able to get. I'm truly thankful for our partners and our federal partners, as well as our local partners. I extend gratitude to my staff every day, the team of professionals that have not stopped working since COVID. We've been open the entire time, whether we've done it differently, whether it be teleworking or dropping off applications or doing it somehow differently. But for me, I'm so thankful that I have the support of our Governor, Albert Bryan, our Lieutenant Governor Roach, Stacey Plaskett, our representative, and our motto for human services is working together to make a difference. So Chairman McGovern, I really truly appreciate you making the effort to identify the solutions and making this a priority area for me, because I am definitely so passionate about this. So I'm thankful to be here today, and I welcome the conversation when we get to it.
Thank you very much. I now turn to Carmen Ana Gonzalez Magaz. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, Chairman McGovern and members of Congress. I am Carmen Ana Gonzalez Magaz. I am the Secretary for the Department of the Family here in Puerto Rico. And Chairman, I have to say, you do not talk funny. I will use this opportunity to apologize for my bracers on my bottom teeth. So I might massacre the English language today. For that, please be a little bit patient with me. I will also like to thank the opportunity for being able to be here on this round table. So as you know, Puerto Rico is not only the biggest territory in the United States, but it's also the most populated one. We have a population of 3.2 million, and from this total, 43.5% live below the poverty level, which means that 1.47 million out of 3.2 million people So this total represents more than 3 times the US national level, which is 14%. The largest demographic group living under these poverty levels are females between 25 and 35 years old, being followed by 35 and 44 years old, and then females between 55 and 64 years old. As you all know, you already know, on September 20th, 2017, Puerto Rico was devastated by the Category 5 hurricane, which cost $43 billion in damages island-wide. This natural disaster had a huge economic impact on most of the population, causing, among many other things, loss of employment, food scarcity and insecurity, mental and health issues, absence of utilities like electricity, water, and communications, as you all know, for a couple of weeks, and a lack of basic necessities. Today, almost 4 years later, Puerto Ricans have been surviving the aftermath of this natural emergency. 2 years and 4 months later, on January 7th, 2020, Puerto Rico was struck again, this time with a magnitude of 6.4 magnitude earthquake occurred across the parts of the south region of the island. This has been the most devastating earthquake in more than 102 years. So this many-year disaster destroyed 8,000 residences, leaving occupants homeless, sheltered at tents provided by U.S. Army and the government. This event also caused a major economic impact on the south region of the island, affecting also employment, businesses, schools, hospitals, and utilities, among many others. Then, on March 12th, 2020, only 3 months after these earthquakes struck the islands, Puerto Ricans were locked for more or less 90 days as a mitigation effort to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. This endeavor, summed to the social distance, created a variety of unique situations and conditions for workers, businesses, employers, public transport. See, that's what I meant by public transportation and community support services, among others. Consequently, a large part of the population was temporarily unemployed and unable to afford basic necessities. During this time, we processed more than 200,000 unemployment claims, and 280,000 families requested SNAP benefits because they did not have the resources to purchase food. Puerto Rico has gone through more than a decade of an economic hardship that has impacted the whole population one way or another. During the last 10 years, Puerto Ricans have experienced the fear of food insecurity, either transitional or permanently. The fact of being a U.S. territory and an island do have a big part in building this insecurity. In addition to the fact that Puerto Rican families and individuals have an urge for support for food, they receive NAP instead of SNAP benefits. Under the NAP program, individuals and households benefits are significantly less than any SNAP participants in the U.S. mainland or territory, putting them in disadvantage with the rest of the nation. These factors together have been the key in delaying food support and other type of aid during emergencies, putting us at risk and their individual and families' health and well-being. In terms of federal programs that provide food to Puerto Rico, we have different from the federal food programs in the U.S. and other territories, since Puerto Rico's funds are capped through a block grant. The benefits issued to participants are distributed among all the participants instead of being issued by participants. So we have the NAP for Puerto Rico's low-income families. We have a supplement to the U.S. mainland and territories food benefit program, which is SNAP. There is a significant difference in income benefits received per individuals or families when compared to the U.S. mainland, Hawaii, Alaska, and other territories. In addition to PR NAP funds are capped as and used strictly for food support benefits. SNAP participants with similar characteristics receive more than twice the benefits than the NAP participants. For example, on the Puerto Rico NAP program, one-person household receives $112 monthly in food benefits, while a SNAP participant in South Hawaii receives $354, and more or less in the similar territories. Currently in Puerto Rico, 44.5% of the population live below the poverty levels, while being women, older adults, and families with several children are the most affected groups. This percentage has been increasing consistently. As May 13th, 2021, we have provided nutrition assistance services to 1.8 million participants out of a 3.3 million population. Of these, 65.65 are women and 43% are women, which represent a slight decrease in the demographic profile by gender in the females when compared to the previous fiscal year, when the ratio to women to men was from 57.5 to 42.95%. In addition to the NAP benefits, Puerto Rico also receives other federal programs to support food necessities like we have TAM, for example, which impacts the poorest communities and is limited to assist just one unemployed parent instead of two unemployed parents as the rest of the US. We have TPAP, which distributes nutritional food bestowed by the Federal Department of Agriculture to low-income families eligible under NAP and TAN participants under all its categories. The elderly, for example, the blind, disabled, and single parents with minor children, living in sectors of extreme poverty and in public housing projects. We have the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which is for benefiting adults 60 years and older. We have the Soup Kitchen, which distributes food and nonprofit institutions that serve prepared meals for homeless people, abused children and women, drug addicts, HIV positive people, and AIDS patients living temporarily at these institutions. And we have the Pandemic EBT, which provides food assistance in an EBT card to students K-12 and children in childcare participants of the school lunch program while their schools are closed because of the pandemic virus. Solutions to end hunger in Puerto Rico. Even though Puerto Rico received the federal assistance described throughout this document, there is imperative that a conversation from this SNAP benefits program to SNAP takes place. This will not only increase the participants' regular benefits levels significantly, but will also provide for additional funding for job training and placement, as well as for other funding flexibilities that do not exist under the NAP program. The disparity of benefits levels between both programs impedes the neediest sectors of Puerto Rico population, around 1.5 million American citizens that can have a better nutrition and quality of life. To end hunger, it requires more than just giving people a meal today. Addressing the root causes of hunger, primarily poverty, is just as important. As long as people do not have the economic resources to put food on their table, hunger, we know, will continue. Food security also works for policy reforms to ensure economic self-sufficiency over long term. Development assistance programs are intended to reduce poverty and encourage economic growth. They include programs for agriculture, health, education, the environment, among many others. There are many situations that could be prevented if actions are taken faster. The employment stability improves the food quality in our families, and it has been demonstrated that low-paid jobs and unemployment leads to bad nutrition. Families that do not receive food support need to select between paying their rent or utilities rather than a balanced and healthy nutrition and meals. Equal food assistance benefits, health programs, better paid jobs, more education and training opportunities can help us better prepare our people and prevent future food insecurity and extreme poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, we'll go to Mr. Tebuteb.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Chairman McGovern and Honorable Congressman Kilili and staff, and half a day to each and every one of you on this panel. I represent a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to find solutions to poverty. For now, putting food on the table for those who have and continue to seek our help. We help mainly low-income families, the elderly and disabled, and believe it or not, a handful of the homeless. We get funding help from private donations and some elected leaders, so we rely heavily on monetary and in-kind, and there is no consistent funding stream. I have, while our organization, the Empty Vessel, ministry has been on island for the past decade. I just joined it recently, so I'm new on board, and I now realize that we have to rely on donations from the private sector and individuals, and a handful of Congress folks have assisted us. But we receive funds from the Emergency Food and Shelter Program for the past three funding phases. That funding, as you know, is based on federally established formula, and it's never enough. I think the funding distribution can be modified, or other funding streams can be availed for us nonprofits to address the gaps of existing federal anti-hunger programs like NAP and even the Office on Aging. As alluded to by the chairman earlier, there are programs within our communities that sometimes do not work hand in hand. I'll just give a trivial example of that. We also help the elderly who qualify for assistance from the aging program, but the aging program cannot help them out because they have no address as per their regulation. We know them. Give me the food. We have the manpower. I know their address because they're homeless. So that's just an example of the need to amalgamate all the resources that are available to the existing federal programs that are helping our people in need of food, just like the public school system. The demographics that I also see utilize our empty vessel ministry are contract workers and their families, people falling through the cracks, so to speak, that are not eligible for NAP, so they rely on us to help, and we help. And even NAP recipients come in during the latter part of the month, usually when NAP funding has run out, and that is due to the changing demographics, changing economic issues, and all that has happened over the years. Yet the block grant continues to remain at fairly the same level. So I was involved also with NAP for the past, I was there for 8 years. And one of the sticky points was that, the administration was not willing to move to SNAP because of the administrative costs that it had to bear. So I'm here to, extend my, support. I believe the inclusion of SNAP for the CNMI is long overdue. And that is due to the dramatic changes within and without our CNMI and the world for that matter. I thank you so much for the opportunity to, say my piece and off a day and have a good day.
Well, thank you very, very much. And I think we're now going to go to kind of a more directed discussion, and just urge everybody to keep their answers within kind of a 5-minute period. We're in the rules committee. We usually don't have any rules, so sometimes these things go on forever. But we're trying to to see whether we can keep this kind of under the normal process. Look, I mean, first of all, I'll save most of my questions for last. I mean, people raised issues of poverty, access issues, food costs, climate change plays a role. A lot of different things are at play here. But I want to begin where, kind of with the question that Mrs. Radwagen raised earlier about the availability or the challenges that people may have getting culturally appropriate food, especially in government sponsored federal programs. Is that an issue for all of you? I mean, maybe I'll just go down the list here. And Mr. Fernandez, is that an issue for you?
When we serve our school children, it's definitely an issue as we focused on nutrition standards and so forth, and of course try to make sure that we work within our resources. So on Guam, even though we do receive reimbursement for our school meals, we still require a local subsidy to be able to provide the school's meals to our kids. So there's always that focus on how much it's costing to feed the kids. So we work with a contractor, but with the price of food, transportation to get to Guam and to feed our kids, it becomes, basically you're bringing in food, shipping in food that the kids have to get used to, because it's not the kind of food that they see at home, and they're not used to the meals that are being served. And so we do try to put things to a taste test here and there, but it has been a struggle over the last 5 or 6 years trying to get them to adjust their palates with the food that we can bring in. So we do want to figure out ways to invest more in local in local food that can be produced on Guam, while still meeting the nutrition requirements and all the other federal requirements regarding what kind of food can be served, how it's packaged, how it's brought in, and so forth. So, yes.
Ms. Kazi Gomez?
We have a little bit of a hybrid when it comes to like the cultural food aspect of things. So Meals on Wheels specifically, we get a lot of complaints that it doesn't taste good because of the lack of seasoning. But that's mostly because of the dietary needs of the Meals on Wheels. So it's not necessarily that we can't season it specifically. It's just like it has to be bland based on the fact that it's too much salt or sodium or something to that effect. Our Head Start meals are served family style, and we usually are very local in cuisine. So, and I have a few favorites when we were opened of where I would go for lunch, because I knew which ones were serving specifically what I like to enjoy. As far as the school system, I think that it's a little bit of a hybrid. So sometimes we get some local stuff, but then we, of course, are still doing the nutrition or based on USDA. So I think for us, it just depends on the program, on how it works and how we can adapt it.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez-Magaz?
Hi, yeah, well, until now, the food has been pretty similar to our palates, so we haven't had any complaints or concerns about it. And sadly to say, we have been through so many different emergencies that our people have been, they need the food that they will take. Again, sadly, what they have been given, but food has been, we have had no complaints or concerns about them. So.
And Mr. Tebutem?
Only a couple issues I want to raise along that line. One, sometimes the kids don't like the lunch being served in the public school system. Just as an example, just yesterday, we drove 3 kids home, and they have seen our work providing food to the homeless. And when we got down to donate the bread that is donated to us to give away, guess what? The students got down, and because of the emotion that they saw, they gave away their lunch. Now PSS is going to say, wait a minute, that lunch is for students only, right? And wait a minute, Asian cannot deliver food to a qualified elderly because, like I said, no address. So now for me, I say, give me the food and I'll deliver it. The other issue is there are many regulations now that are hindering, the local population or interest to go out and fish because they don't want you to catch the fish if it's not seasonal. Yet that has always been a daily staple, in our lives for the past century. So those are the points I just want to bring out.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think it's kind of an important issue in the sense that, I mean, if people don't feel comfortable eating the food that we provide, or they don't like the taste of the food, that's obviously problematic. And I think you could probably meet the nutritional standards utilizing, local foods that are more in line with various cultures than just kind of like one glove fits all. But anyway, I have other questions, but I'm gonna go later. I'm gonna yield now to Mr. Congressman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to recognize your leadership on this topic, and more specifically how it's been consistent with our leadership of our Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Majority Leader Hoyer in both the 116th and 117th Congresses that have been renewing the attention to territories in unprecedented fashion. So I thank you, sir, Mr. McGovern, for also providing that leadership with this hearing. I think we've heard a great deal about the scope of the problem, but I'd like to speak very specifically in this hearing to potential solutions to this problem. Mr. Chairman, I can speak directly for Guam, but I do not doubt our fellow territories experience the same. As much as we have differences in whether we are under the Nutritional Assistance Program or SNAP, or our differences in various block grants that we might be receiving to address hunger on a federally funded basis, I think all of us can agree that the cost of food is the biggest inhibitor to us being able to address the hunger concerns in our various jurisdictions. And for us here specifically on Guam, Mr. Chairman, the biggest contributor to the cost of food is the price of importing that food into Guam. 90% of our imports come from the United States. The Jones Act limits our ability to be able to bring in foodstuffs at a more reasonable price point. And what that does is it erodes the purchasing power of every SNAP dollar. It erodes the purchasing power of every working class individual who isn't on any kind of public assistance. And it results in our grocery costs being 3 times to 5 times higher than what you would find at, the giant supermarket in, any regular state throughout the contiguous lower 48. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could present a direct potential solution, because I think that's the intent of this hearing, we need to get a territorial exemption to the Jones Act, if for nothing else, for the importation of food. We should be able to at least get food to be exempt from Jones Act restrictions. That one outcome would dramatically reduce the cost of food imports into our various territories. It would provide greater equity on the purchasing power of our federal subsidies. And it would go a very long way between people having to decide whether they only can afford to purchase instant noodles or whether they can actually afford to purchase meat. And in the end, when we talk about hunger, it's not just about meals, it's not just about calories, it's about nutrition. And when food is just way too expensive for people to be able to afford it, they're going to stretch their dollars out on however they can make it manage into the next meal. And in order for us to actually address the hunger concerns, at least specifically to Guam, we need to be able to lower the cost of bringing quality food into our territory and onto our tables. And so a territorial exemption to the Jones Act, at least for food importations, if not also for medicine, would go a very, very long way towards improving the quality of life and addressing the hunger concerns in our territory. And with that, with whatever time I have left, Mr. Chairman, if there's any detail that my superintendent, Mr. Fernandez, would like to add on top of his previous testimony, I would respectfully yield to him.
The only thing I would add is exactly right, is that even with the federal assistance that comes in, you're still purchasing it at the grocery stores, and so like I said, it's good to have the PEBT program that the families can take to the store, but it doesn't lower the price of food. And so it could go a longer way. We can address some of those cost issues. Same on the reimbursement side for school meals, to mirror the fact that the territories are going to incur those additional costs. It would be helpful to reflect that in the reimbursement rates, and to see how many, to maximize the number of kids who can benefit. And like the congressman said, nutritionally, we do get the reimbursement, but because we stretch our dollars out, it may not be the highest quality and highest, most nutritious food. We do, just sort of out of interest, we do have 4 schools. We have, out of our 41 schools, we have, Sodexo is our contractor for most of them, but we still have 4 traditional cafeterias with our cafeteria employees who worked maybe 20, 30 years in our system. They make the best food. It's within the nutritional standards. They use the traditional local, styles and tastes. It costs more though to run those cafeterias, and that's been a real tragedy for the kids who have to choose, what they're going to eat on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Congresswoman Plaskett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for, as my colleagues have said, this incredible opportunity that you and the leadership have given to elevate and raise the issues that are important to the territories. I want to thank my own commissioner, Kimberly Causey Gomez, who is the Commissioner of Human Services in the Virgin Islands. And thank you to all of the witnesses for not just agreeing to be a part of the discussion today, but for the tremendous commitment you have to your homes and to the people that you serve. Poverty and food are, as you know, Chairman, you've been such a leader in this area. Poverty and food insecurity are inextricably linked to one another. In my home district of the U.S. Virgin Islands, according to the 2009 census, the median household in the U.S. Virgin Islands was $37,254, which is about 75% of the mainland estimate of more than 50,000. The distribution of household income levels in the U.S. Virgin Islands is skewed towards lower income brackets compared to the U.S. A total of 13.5% of U.S. Virgin Islands households had incomes below $10,000 in 2009, and compared to 7.8% for the U.S. total. In a 2016 Virgin Islands Kids Count survey, poverty level for U.S. Virgin Islands families with children was reported at 32%, with the highest number of children in poverty living on the island that I live on, Singapore, at 41%. The commissioner talked about generational. This is generational because the federal government and those have placed generational structures in place that continue to keep us in poverty. Generational poverty is not generational because those families want to remain in poverty. It's because we have impeded them from being a part of the American experience and growing in other ways. When the United States purchased the Virgin Islands, President Hoover came down and said, I purchased a veritable poorhouse here in the territory. The Danish government had us at a life expectancy of under 30 years when we were purchased by the United States. And so the work that you're doing now and the work that we're doing to try and increase just food security in the territories is absolutely important, and one of the ways that we pull people out of poverty. And I'm grateful for this hearing and for the work that all of my colleagues are doing on this issue. A couple of questions that I wanted to ask, and we've focused a lot on the COVID pandemic, but one of the things that you talked about, and I find it very interesting, is the Virgin Islands does not have issues of the Jones Act, but all of us have issues of shipping. And so I don't know if it's entirely related to that. I think that we need to look at much more deeply why food costs are the way they are in each one of the territories. One of the things that we look at, and I wanted to ask one of the, particularly my commissioner this question, is the kind of dietary requirements that we have. Commissioner, if you could talk to the cost of milk and what that does in skewing the amount of how much individuals have to pay. The food, what has to be in a SNAP program, what has to be in a school lunch program. The Virgin Islands, we no longer have milk production on our island. And so what we have to pay to bring milk and make that part of our nutrition program, what that means in our ability to have other food items that are healthy, and the expense of that, what does that look like? Are you aware? I don't know, Commissioner, if you could speak to that.
Sure. Milk is so expensive. I mean, for a gallon of milk sometimes. It depends on the grocery store. Yogurt is another very high level of commodity. The cost of food in general, if you go to the grocery store and basic necessities, you're bringing home $250, $300. Well, a lot of times when I see food baskets are things that are less expensive. Sugar reduced and things that you could buy. You're not getting the freshness that we would like. Like Representative Plaskett said, I mean, that in general, so outrageous.
Yeah, and for us as well, Mr. Chairman, another issue is refrigeration. And so because of our high utility costs, a place like Washington, D.C., individuals pay 14 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. In the Virgin Islands, we pay over 40 cents per kilowatt hour. So the cost for school lunches to remain refrigerated also drive up the cost. So it's not just food that we need to look at. It's a whole of government, a holistic approach to how do we support school lunch programs and other programs, SNAP and others, so that families can be able to afford healthy foods and making choices. I am not paying $7, $10 a gallon for milk is normal in the Virgin Islands, as opposed to here in the mainland, you're paying $3, a gallon. Those are the kinds of things that drive up costs that make it much more difficult. Commissioner, can you elaborate on how the pandemic may have created additional challenges for SNAP households in the Virgin Islands? And what are the most important actions that Congress should take to ensure that households receive the assistance they need?
So pandemic-wise, when our schools are closed, that's when all of your children are now home. Our child care centers were closed. So all children are home now. And so when they were home, when they go to school, they get reduced lunch. And sometimes that's breakfast and lunch, potentially a snack. So if they're home and not provided any type of assistance, whether they are eligible or not eligible for SNAP, that causes a problem. And so for us, inequity across the board. So for that, moving forward, we need to be on the same level as every other place. It should never be a place at United States Virgin Islands that doesn't have the same. I'm getting a little feedback. Are you getting feedback too? No? Okay. The same level as everyone else. The fact that we have a cap on Medicaid, that's another issue if you look at it from that perspective. We don't have SSDI. So there's lots of things here that other places have that we don't. So food for COVID, our COVID response was we were able to get flexibilities and waivers for all of our programs, which allowed for us to continue to do what we do. Transportation costs, we didn't even really talk about that. We don't have a mass bus system necessarily. We have taxis. We don't have Uber. We don't have Lyft. We don't have a mass transit situation. So to get from point A to point B, to get to your job in general, we've had people wait for taxis for an hour. It depends on where you're going. They don't go at night sometimes. So there's lots of things that other places have that we don't have, that we have to take into effect. I'm so glad you brought up the water and power, because it's exorbitant. Like and you don't even have air conditioning in most places, so it's not even that aspect. Or the fact that we've had numerous power outages on a regular basis, where it's out 2, 4, 5, 6 hours. So now the food that you may have just purchased could potentially go bad, depending upon what you have as far as refrigeration. In St. Thomas alone recently, I believe they had a 24, 48-hour outage. So that's just like a hurricane. That's just like a disaster response where your food is going to spoil. And so I think overall for us, being treated equally, raising that dollar amount per child potentially could assist. But the fact that we have 31, almost a third of our population receiving some type of assistance, that's a lot. That goes back to our poverty guidelines. What can we do locally? Can we do more jobs? Can we pay higher salary? Can we train more in order for them to be eligible to receive or to work? It's that as soon as you start working, then all of a sudden now you're not eligible for any of the benefits. So now it's like, why should I work if I get more from receiving the benefit? So that right there for me is, so as soon as I want to work, I'm now cut off from my benefits, but I can't afford childcare, and now I can't afford food. So now what do I do? So I think that inequity right there is a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I just want to say, when Ms. Plaskett and Mr. San Nicolas raised in their questions, and Mr. Fernandez and Ms. Kazi Gomez, I think what you are illustrating here is that it is not one thing. It's multiple things. And that it's energy costs, it's transportation costs. That's why it's important that Secretary Buttigieg be part of this conversation, and Secretary at Transportation, Secretary Granholm, be part of this at Energy. As I said at the beginning, I mean, in Massachusetts, we, unlike all of you, we get very cold winters, and heating bills skyrocket. And that has a direct impact on a whole bunch of things, right? People's ability to be able to buy food. And so, so this is an important discussion because, when we talk about these issues, we just tend to usually talk about like SNAP, that's it. Or maybe just school meals, and that's it. It is a much bigger conversation. Those programs I just mentioned are very, very important, but there are other things. Cost of food because of transportation and energy. Those need to be front and center. I want to yield to I'm going to Ms. Gonzalez-Colon for any remarks or comments she may have right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to echo Stacy and St. Nicholas in terms of thanking you. I know the issue of hunger is not new for you, and strengthening nutrition assistance available to our people is one of your priorities. And we saw that during the pandemic with your mask on, saying ending hunger. So this is not just a roundtable, and we know that. And I appreciate you for hosting this roundtable, including the territories, so that we have an opportunity at the table to voice our concerns and give our take on nutrition-related issues. And I need to say this because it's not necessarily the same issues you will face in the States. And there are multiple programs. I just want to keep it brief. I think the issue that Stacy brought in terms of is not about Jones Act. It's about shipping, and those are different things. Energy as well, and the programs itself, because not all territories got the same programs. Some of them got SNAP. In the case of Puerto Rico, we do have different challenges. One of them is we do have NAP. Not SNAP, and that means whenever it's a disaster, the disaster clause does not apply to the territories that do not have SNAP, and that means we need to come to Congress and approve a different amount of funds and allocate funds. And if we get it, fine. If we don't have it, that means that a lot of people are going to get out of the program as well. And I want to just focus on things that the Secretary of Family Services in Puerto Rico just brought, and I want to say thank you to her for agreeing to this roundtable. The system program that we do have on the island, which is SNAP, has a capped block grant. In that nutrition benefits over 1.5 million people on my island. It's half of it, which means that therefore our main source to combat hunger among needy residents. And this program has proven to be one of the main programs my constituents turn during emergency periods. So we saw it in Maria, the secretary explained it well, same thing with the pandemic. And yet one of the main challenges we still face with NAP is that because it received a capped amount of funds, it cannot automatically accommodate the fluctuations in demand that are most prevalent during natural disasters and emergencies. Additionally, NAP beneficiaries receive fewer monthly benefits than their SNAP counterparts, which impacts their purchasing power and our economy. And we were, Stacy, we were talking just a few minutes ago about the price of milk. Easy and direct, ingredients of the nutritional basket. That happens in Puerto Rico. As well, and I believe proper nutrition assistance can be achieved through participation in SNAP, and that's why we've been working with administration and USDA and relevant stakeholders to understand what a proper transition from NAP to SNAP could look like and factor if is needed for a seamless and reliable transition in Puerto Rico. And Secretary, thank you, but I want to go in a direct question here, just to establish how many individuals right now are currently enrolled in NAP and I.
Well, it's about 1.5.
1.5.
I'm sorry, it's 1.5. Yeah, million individuals and around 867,000 families.
Okay. And because of NAP limited funding, we have to go to Congress on multiple occasions to secure additional NAP dollars in the aftermath of Maria, on the earthquakes, and of course the pandemic. What are the potential consequences of maintaining base level funds after emergency, and how can this complicate the access to nutritional benefits?
Well, one of the things is the SNAP eligibility tables for maximum allowable income are below the NAP eligibility table. So that doesn't allow working sectors or individuals to enter SNAP. As for cases for students who qualify for the NAP, these are separate cases that have very low income or no income at all. In terms of people 60 years and over, they are allowed a 50% reduction on Social Security income or requirements.
Okay, and I know, and we've been working with this, let's say that we are authorized to make a transition between NAP to SNAP. That means that the department needs to have some IT capabilities to manage the new people that are going to be accommodated in the transition. And you will need, of course, to have more management that you currently own to place this and make it happen. Reviewing the changes from and eligibility from NAP to SNAP, most notably are going to be changes for students and elderly, right? Lives on the island. Do you foresee any issue with beneficiaries who are in NAP that may not be eligible for SNAP? And if we're working on those kind of cases?
No, not right now. And in terms of technology, we're dealing with the technology to assess everything at CEF, the administration that works with SNAP to SNAP. It's also have been getting all the equipment, and we are training the personnel so that it's going to be easier also for the population and also for the eligibility concepts.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to add that although I'll try to focus this conversation on NAP to SNAP in the case of Puerto Rico, as many other delegates established, is an issue about transportation, is an issue of telecom access. Right now, with the pandemic, most of the island do not have access to internet, and many kids are just more than 24,000 kids just failed in school because they never got access to internet. And that's one of the issues. So transportation, shipping, access to those kind of programs, food, are important as well. And I want to say and reiterate my thank you to you for your leadership in this and many other issues, and for always helping Puerto Rico. Whenever we ask you, you've been there. And I need to say this publicly. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. I have a cousin who lives in Vieques, so she never lets me forget what's happening in Puerto Rico. But the issue of infrastructure is an important issue. And again, that's why we need an infrastructure bill to pass. And that's also in the American Rescue Package, monies that have gone to communities have also enabled communities to spend that on, better access to the internet. But look, the challenges in the territories are unique, and they're also, they're significant. But we have infrastructure challenges all over the place. So we need an infrastructure bill. We need to be able to make sure the infrastructure is able to accommodate whatever adjustments that are going to be made, either in programs or in, or certainly in terms of having internet access. I want to now turn to Mr. Sablan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman McGovern, members of your Rules Committee and your dedicated staff for putting together today's roundtable and for the series of discussions you are holding on how we can better address hunger in America. Chairman McGovern, for all my time here in Congress, you are a tireless advocate for the hungry, and you have always been personally supportive of my work to get the Northern Marianas into SNAP. I will submit more comments for the record, but before I ask my questions, I'd like to mention one single thing that I think underlies the problems for many of the territories in terms of assistance for our citizens. In the myriad of programs that aid Americans, the thousands at least, only about 700 plus are available to the territories. And among these programs themselves, some apply to one territory and not the others, like SSI, or to some and not to one, like TANF. So this disparity needs addressing in a more formal manner, such that I will be calling a natural resources hearing to begin listening from territorial witnesses how to obtain parity for Americans who call the territories home. That is at least a first step in what I hope would be a much more better effort. Now, one of the groups in the Marianas that help distribute funding from FEMA is the Empty Vessel Ministry. And as you have already met Mr. Tebutet, the director of Empty Vessel, who was also in his career the Marianas Secretary of Community and Cultural Affairs, and that's the department that administers the NAP block grant. So Mr. Tebutet has an understanding of how both the public sector and nonprofits in the Marianas aid the hungry, and I also welcome Mr. Tebutet here as a witness. I welcome the other witnesses and my colleagues. I have several questions for you, Tom, so I appreciate you keeping your responses as brief as possible, please. Can you please explain the mission of Empty Vessel Ministry and why Empty Vessel is an important part of the anti-hunger program in the Marianas?
Yeah. Thank you, Congressman. The important role we play is that we assist, like I said earlier, those who fall through the crack that NAP cannot accommodate by virtue of, one, because of the high cost of food that they have to buy in the stores. What happens is that, their resources are depleted by virtue of the expensive, food items they have to get. And so they reach out to us. And given that we're between a rock and a hard place in that we, as a nonprofit, cannot discriminate. We assist those people, including the CW families, including other contract workers that were impacted by the COVID and were terminated from their jobs. So we play an important role along that line.
Right. So I know your ministry is a beneficiary of or receives a share of the FEMA program on food aid. So do you think Congress should reform how the FEMA funding is distributed? Or would it be helpful for other funding streams to be opened up for nonprofits like yours to address the anti-hunger programs such as the Marianas Block Grant, NAP Block Grant, and SNAP?
At this point, we're at the mercy of the federal, regulations in that, what is given to, Red Cross as the local council. We as a subrecipient have no choice but to adhere to their requirements, which is not very helpful to us because the funding that we get, 98% of that goes strictly for food. So what are you going to do with 2%? It doesn't even pay our bills and rental. So if there is any way that can be modified, and even if there is any way that funding streams via the public school system food program, even the aging program and NAP can be helpful, then that would be a great help for us. And at least for this committee, Mr. Chairman, to look into the need to amalgamate our resources, since our hands are tied by the existing rules, like not being able to help someone who is quasi qualified, by the way. And so we intervene by getting donations from the private sector, and we help those who come to us.
Yeah. And as a member of the Agriculture Committee, I have heard time and again that the benefits cliff happens even with SNAP, the SNAP program. A lesson to members in Congress where SNAP is available to your constituents, that it is not always sufficient, let alone those of us who are recipients of the block grant, NAP block grant. For the Marianas, it's 12,001,148 for the past decade. With your understanding of the Marianas block grant and SNAP, Mr. Tibbetts, do you think including the Marianas in SNAP would help alleviate hunger?
Absolutely. I noted that earlier, and that is because of the need to deal with the rising cost of food and the other issues that your distinguished colleagues have raised in terms of transportation, the need for infrastructure and all that. For the block grant to remain constant for that length of time is not acceptable, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And the need to include SNAP in the Marianas will help alleviate some of the the clients that fall through the crack come to us, because at least they would stress their dollars, and hopefully with the work of everyone cutting down the cost of shipment, maybe it can it'll be more helpful to the clients.
Yeah, so I'm talking about shipment. Just so I like to share with everyone in this room, the transportation of say goods. Of say, let's say one frozen chicken from Tyson's. I mean, one Tyson's chicken from Springdale in Arkansas. So it goes from Springdale or a Tyson chicken farm. It goes to either the Oakland or the Los Angeles port. And from there, it gets shipped to Hawaii. From Hawaii, it gets shipped to Guam. From Guam, it gets shipped to Saipan. And then from Saipan, it gets on a barge that goes to Tinian and to Rota. And with Rota, there's half the time of the year where the barge cannot come in because of the rising tides, and it's not safe for the barge to come in. So I have seen for myself a 3-pound frozen chicken that costs $15 in Rota because they have to be flown in by plane. So it's very expensive. But Chairman McGovern, again, I want to thank you and your Rules Committee for giving Mr. Tevete, myself, and my colleagues the opportunity to come before you to discuss how federal hunger programs operate in the U.S. insular areas, just as you have heard about other regions of America. And as this Congress and the Rules Committee continue to discuss our nation's anti-hunger policies and how we can improve them, I urge my colleagues to keep in mind Marianas and the other insular areas and all the Americans who live there. This is indeed are important conversations. And again, I thank you, Chairman McGovern.
Well, thank you very much. And before I yield to Ms. Scanlon of Pennsylvania, let me just say, you may not have, I've tried to do this seamlessly, but there's been a couple of moments when I've had to kind of leave. And the Rules Committee is right next to the House floor. We've had a series of votes. And so I apologize for that. But I want to say that every single person, every single member of Congress on this call should also have been distracted like I was and Ms. Scanlon was and Mr. Morelli was and had to vote. We have to fix that. That's a little bit a different topic. But we are doing this because we have great admiration for the members of Congress who are on this call representing the territories. And many were kind, saying, "Oh, you're nice to do this hearing," and crediting our leadership and all. I mean, the bottom line is the reason why there's more focus on the territories is because the assembled members of Congress who represent the territories are persistent, are passionate, and are constantly raising these issues. I mean, we are, I would like to think that without prompting, we would, as we're talking about a White House conference on food, hunger, health, and nutrition, that we would naturally have gathered this together. But the bottom line is it is the assembled group of highly effective legislators that are on this call that are making this a reality. And quite frankly, if in fact we get this White House conference, which I trust we will, that a discussion with regard to food insecurity and hunger in the territories will be part of it, because this group will not out to go forward without it. But now let me turn to Ms. Scanlon from Pennsylvania.
Thank you. And thank you again for convening this series of hearings on hunger across all of the United States and territories. It's been really interesting to listen to today's witnesses because we're hearing echoes of things that we've heard throughout the series. The issue of making sure that food is culturally competent so that people want to eat the food that is being distributed. The challenges of refrigeration, we've seen that in my district. The challenges of making sure that the benefits that are provided are actually enough in this day and age, wherever you are, to make sure that people can actually be fed. And just the fact that all of this really sits within the larger issue of poverty across all of the United States and territories, and what can we do to address these interlocking issues. So I think the good news for the territories, and the last one was the need to have flexibility so that people can adapt to local conditions as they try to meet the needs of constituencies in various places. And then, of course, just time, distance, and transportation put all of those issues on steroids for all of your constituents. So I think the good news is that there's a lot of common themes, while the issues may be unique to each area, they are reflective of problems that we see throughout the system. So that will hopefully make it easier to address or to incorporate some of these solutions as we move forward. So I just thank you all for bringing the testimony, and these issues are playing out in your various homes to us, so that it helps build out the picture even further. And with that, I would yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Morelli of New York.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you. I know, given the time difference, it's probably the middle of the night where some of you are, but this is a really important subject, and I very much appreciate the chair and my colleagues. We've had now, I think this is probably the fifth or sixth, maybe even more roundtables that we've had on this important question of hunger in America. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in and have asked at previous panels is if you could just talk a little bit about sort of the system or the systemic failures, not only around hunger, but people who struggle with hunger often have other challenges related to housing insecurity, have challenges of living in poverty, and whether or not you've given much thought to or are working on any solutions that are more comprehensive in nature, and anything that we could learn from that work, or things that we could do to eliminate barriers for people to be successful.
May I take a stab at that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, again, like I mentioned, there is, again, and among all the programs that benefit Americans, there are about 700, a little over 700 programs that benefit Americans in the territories. Within that 700, there are programs where it benefits one territory and not the other four. Or there are programs that benefit 4 territories and not one. This a disparity. With SNAP, for example, it's applicable to the U.S. Virgin Islands and to Guam, and yet it's inapplicable to Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and to the Marianas. That's just SNAP, and there are all kinds of other programs. There are also many, many, many programs that apply to Americans in the nation and not to the territories. There's a lawsuit going up. There's a suit going up in federal courts about SSI, why this individual in New York had SSI. When he moved residents to Puerto Rico, he was disqualified from the program. So those are the very things. There are issues, problems that underlie poverty in the territories, just policy questions. And I know some of my colleagues say, and I speak for the Northern Marianas, some of my colleagues say we don't pay federal taxes. Actually, we do. We have the mirror image of the Internal Revenue Code. The only problem is that if we apply the Internal Revenue Code, we would receive less in revenue just from taxes paid in the Marianas. And so what our government has done is we put together a territorial system of tax, because it brings more revenue to the government than it does if we were to apply the Internal Revenue Code. And we have a much bigger problem than we have today. So I hope that maybe someone else has a better answer.
I'd actually like to echo what my colleague Kilili had to say, Congressman Morelli. If we can just go across the board and look at these areas where we have some things applying in some territories and other things not applying in others, we will solve a lot of the hunger issues on a broad scale. CNMI needs SNAP. Puerto Rico needs SNAP. Guam and Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, we need SSI. Those kind of changes that aren't actually changes, but they're really just bringing equity across the spectrum would go a very long way towards addressing the hunger problems by just getting the resources to the communities that need them, that are supposed to be receiving them, if the equity was there. And I would just like to proffer that, Mr. Chairman, as another potential solution, even as we're talking about, the budget reconciliation and the solutions that might be able to come forward from there. You know, as much as the Congress is rightfully looking at expanding programs for the whole country, us in the territories, we would just like to be brought whole in many of these programs. And, you know, if we can get support to just bring us whole, expansion or no expansion, those would be transformative, not only on the hunger scale, but on the housing scale, the transportation scale. You know, we would find a lot of our problems being naturally resolved by the programs that are already existing. And so if we can get solutions even just for those, we will go a long way towards addressing the hunger challenges that our territories are facing. And thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate very much given the opportunity to sit and hear all your comments. And Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
All right, before I kind of bring this to a close, I want to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record testimony provided to us by Catholic Social Services, Catholic Charities of Guam, and also from the, this is from, we have one more here. This is from Andrew Hammond, Assistant Professor of Law at the Levin College of Law at the University of Florida. And we will continue to keep the record open for additional testimony on this topic. You know, first of all, I appreciate everybody's testimony, and again, there's not one thing; there's multiple things, and I think that's, you know, we need to, I think, appreciate that, and so we do need to connect the dots, and it's an all hands on deck approach, especially at the governmental level. I mean, it's not just USDA, it's the Department of Energy, it's the Department of Transportation, it's the, you know, the Pentagon too. I mean, we have a lot of active duty military personnel and their families who are hungry. It's a whole bunch of, it's HHS. This is a health component to this. And one of the things that, just so you all, one of the things we've been doing with a lot of our hearings and forums and site visits is we've been looking at, in addition to examining kind of governmental programs, unique, effective local initiatives that have been helpful in combating hunger and nutrition insecurity, and have been very helpful in terms of dealing with some of the healthcare needs as well. And we're trying to find out whether or not there are some of these programs some of these initiatives, if we incentivized, you know, communities, whether they could be spread throughout, you know, the entire country, including the territories. And I'm learning a lot. I was with Ms. Scanlon, we were in Philadelphia, looking at an urban farm, and I was learning about the term food sovereignty. You know, we talk about food insecurity, but also food sovereignty, which gets to what Ms. Radewagen talked about in the beginning about culturally sensitive, you know, approaches to providing people meals. People would like to have some control over what they put in their bodies. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or whether you struggle in poverty or whether you're somewhere in between. People want to have some power over what they put on their dining room tables. And I think that's something that we need to be thinking about as we come up with solutions. I visited programs, one in Philadelphia called MANA. I visited a program in New York City called God's Love We Deliver. Massachusetts is called Community Servings, about providing medically tailored meals to people who are sick or who've just been released from the hospital, so that, I mean, understanding that there's a link between food and medicine. And one of the things that is really clear to all of us who've been doing this is that there's a disconnect between our healthcare system and our healthcare approach to things and food and nutrition. You can become you can become a doctor in this country, go through medical school and not learn a damn thing about nutrition. That's just crazy, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that we need to look at. here. Before I ask my last question, let me just make sure, Congresswoman Radaway, anything else you want to add or say before we wrap this up?
Well, just very quickly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank everyone here again for their contributions to this discussion. And as we've heard today, there's some similarities between our districts, but ultimately the through line is that there's no one size fits all when it comes to addressing food insecurity. And at the end of the day, this is about the people making an effort to meet them where they are at. We're all human. We all need to eat. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing that fundamental fact of life. I know we can work to end hunger once and for all.
Thank you very much. Now, we've talked a little bit about some governmental programs. Everybody on this call, every member of Congress on this call is working with USDA and the Agriculture Committee on SNAP issues. Everybody on this call is working with education and labor. I'm sure we're all doing it. But let me just ask the panelists one just quickly. We understand the challenges with the governmental programs, but taking away the governmental programs, if there's one additional thing to focus on, that's important to focus on, that it relates to the territories, that's not, SNAP or school meals or Meals on Wheels like that, what would it be? Is it energy? Is it transportation costs? Is it lack of support for local agriculture? What is it that we can? What is it that also needs to be discussed at this conference? And let me begin with Mr. Fernandez.
First of all, I think that your voice and the voice of all of the advocates on behalf of this issue is very important, because part of it is really just mindset and awareness. So every agency, no matter what silo you're in, to know that this is, I look at it as the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is, the kids have to eat, and they're going to learn, if they're going to do anything, beyond just coming to school and sitting in class. So, but beyond that, here on Guam, we really are trying to encourage more of an investment and more of an awareness of what we can do locally to address these needs. So we talk about community gardens in all of our schools. We talk about our local farmers and produce, and how to incorporate, locally produced, produce and into our school meals, because of all the barriers and issues that complicate that. So we really, I think that through this pandemic, what was really evident was that all the support coming in gave a level of urgency and flexibility to the agencies and what we were doing. We would like more of that opportunity with those resources to be flexible in creating those local solutions. So we really would hope that discussion about innovation at the local level really continues with any further discussion, especially a conference on this matter. So thank you for your leadership.
And some of the flexibility that had been provided local communities as a result of the pandemic, we need to preserve that flexibility, right? I just did a tour of summer feeding programs in my district in Massachusetts, and the one thing I heard was, don't go back to the old way. Understand that the flexibility not only helped during the pandemic, but it can help in, post-pandemic, and that, rules that say that, I can only deliver a meal if you eat it in a congregate setting. While there's value to that, right? We want to give people, the ability to, we want to, provide additional support services, but sometimes it's just not practical. And we need to be able to give that person that meal, and they need to be able to, maybe bring it off of the site, whatever. But we need to understand that it's not, if it's a hungry student, it's probably a hungry family. So there's that connection. Ms. Kazi Gomez.
I want to make sure that we serve all populations. So we talk about students and children, but we have a lot of elderly that are on a fixed income. And so they're also hungry. they might not eat as much necessarily. I see the dietary people kind of restricting diet per se. So I think that serving the vulnerable populations that we have and understanding those that are at risk for it, so that borderline population too, I think we need to make sure we're taking care of. I love the flexibility and waivers.
Right.
It's really helped us a lot here. Cost of living in general in Virgin Islands, and I'm sure at other places too, is very high. Energy costs are high and food costs, and so if we can somehow bring those down, it'll at least balance it out just a bit. Education and training, I think, for those that are receiving the benefits is also really important. So how do we educate to make it go further, maybe? And so how do we also the training and jobs programs too, I think, are very important to prevent the poverty aspect of things.
Yeah. And you make a very important point about our seniors, senior population. Within senior citizens, that's where hunger is growing at one of the most rapid rates. I mean, I visited hospitals where emergency rooms where doctors have told me that they have a high percentage of seniors who come into their emergency rooms who are taking their medications on an empty stomach when it says take with the meal, and they don't have the money to pay for their, the energy costs and the whatever the rent is and their medicine, and so they go without food, and they end up in a hospital, and it really is sad because I mean our senior population, they're the ones who have raised our families, have worked in our factories, fought in our wars. I mean, it's like, how do we? And I say this all the time because it really frustrates me that one of the things that is most maddening about the issue we're talking about is that this is solvable. Right? I mean, I'm like, some things I don't know what the hell the answer is, right? I mean, this is a solvable problem. It's a political condition. We have the money, we have the food, we have the infrastructure, we have the wherewithal, have the knowledge to be able to just, take this problem off the table. But it's just not been the priority that it needs to be. And that's kind of what we hope we can change with this White House conference. Ms. Gonzalez Magaz.
Hi, Chairman. Yes. Well, as you said, nutrition and medicine and health, it should be on a balanced and mixed. Our major concern right now is that for elders and people with disabilities, they can't have. I mean, they do have the money benefits, but they can't have access to prepared foods. Right. So if they have any special circumstances or they cannot have access to cook those meals, they have the same problems that we have been discussing for the past and the other thing is we have been asking for this kind of waiver for some time now. So it should be, I'm using the opportunity to bring it to the floor again to see what we can do about it.
Thank you. Mr. Tabutab.
Chairman, well, given that there is a sense of understanding in looking at, poverty or hunger and food security in a global perspective that we have all discussed, for the CNMI, at least for me, at least for the chairman or any other supporters to communicate to our government via, I don't know your protocol, but at least via a short, notice or via a phone call to our leaders with, our congressmen to, to let us know out here that this is an initiative that is going forward and that there's a need for us on the local level to understand that you understand the need to amalgamate resources on the federal and even local level so that we can, move forward and even extend, the need for SNAP to be included in the CMI. Thank you for your support.
Is anyone else, before we close this hearing, anyone else have anything they want to add? All right, so let me thank Congress people, Radawagan, Sablan, Plaskett, San Nicolas, and Gonzalez Colon for being part of this and for what they do every day fighting for their constituents and for their compassion. And to the panelists, thank you so very much. I mean, I've learned an awful lot here today, and we will stay in touch with you as we develop this White House conference, which again, I hope will occur sometime next year. And I think this is important because, again, this is all of what we just said here will be in a volume that goes to the White House. But the significance of this is that when we talk about ending hunger in this country, that the territories cannot be ignored. So I think this has been very, very, very useful. And again, I'll just close with this kind of final thought. I've been in Congress now since 1996, longer than I ever thought I would be, longer than some of my critics thought I ever would be too. But anyway, putting that aside, we've been trying to go at this issue 100 different ways, and my colleagues on this call have joined me. And I do think now we're at a different moment. I do think now, we understand that if we want to make some progress on this issue, we have to connect the dots. I mean, we have to look at it holistically. And there's a government role, all hands on deck. There's a role for our nonprofits. There's a role for the business community. This is not just a federal issue. It's a state or territory issue. It's a local issue as well. Every mayor ought to be engaged in this discussion. Our hospitals have a role to play. Our schools have a role to play. We ought to be integrating nutrition lessons and cooking lessons, quite frankly, in our school system, because one of the ways I was talking to a chef who was telling me that unfortunately in a lot of communities people don't know how to cook, and so if you don't know how to cook, you can't make a chicken last for more than one meal. You buy everything pre-made and whatever, and we have to take a whole new fresh look at all of this. And I think that this may be the moment where we might be able to do something meaningful, and I want you all to be part of it in terms of the panelists. Certainly the members of Congress on this call will be, and I'm grateful, and we will stay in touch. So with that, this roundtable is adjourned.
Thank
Everybody
you.
be safe, and thank you for getting up early in the morning. I appreciate it. All the best. Bye.